$206 billion. That's what fintechs and banks spend every year fighting financial crime, more than the GDP of most countries, and a lot of it is just regulatory theater. Most startups building payment APIs treat compliance like a box to check. It's really not. It's the line between scaling and shutting down. Costs are rising, fraudsters are getting smarter, and the truth is, most payment infrastructure cracks the first time you see real volume or your first wave of fraud. So, how do you build APIs that survive, that keeps regulators happy, and that helps companies scale to billions in payments? I'm Tom Chavez, and today I'm joined by Richie Cerna, CEO and co-founder of Finix, payments infrastructure built for SaaS platforms and data-driven companies. Richie, it's really great to have you.
I'm excited, Tom. We've been talking about this for a while.
Right? We made it happen.
Taking the dinner and the drinks and bringing it on the podcast.
That's right. Well, next time, exactly. We'll just bring the microphones to our favorite spot and just chop it up over martinis. And but in the meanwhile, we're here on this screen. So let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Richie, I want to start with your personal journey because it's just a hell of a story. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about where you're from and your journey to tech entrepreneurship, because it's you and I know each other here a little bit, and in many ways, I think we've taken similar journeys in a way, but yours is really unique. So take us back. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Santa Ana, California. That's down in Orange County. It's a population of about 300,000 people. It's about 80% Mexican immigrants, which I think we have a shared heritage. We're both from, or our parents are from Zacatecas, Mexico.
That's right.
And my parents immigrated there back in the 60s and the 70s. Both were undocumented immigrants. Most of my family is still down there. My dad was one of 11. My mom was one of 6. My grandpa was a bracero, so he actually worked out in the fields, and so did my grandmother. So it's definitely a long journey from there to starting a payment company. And so I originally thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a public defender. I had a long history of drug addiction, of gang violence in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and was lucky enough to go to Harvard, which you did as well. And that was pretty transformational for my entire life. I started my career actually in management consulting. Didn't think I was going to be in software engineering. I actually had done some software engineering in middle school, but the only class that we had, there was one class, and it was just building websites, and they didn't have anything after that other than working in the for the IT department, which I actually did over lunch just so I could play video games as well. So very nerdy sort of start there. And I was pretty unfulfilled as a management consultant. Was making more money than both my parents combined right out of college, and just it wasn't what I wanted out of life. And so I started thinking, though, well, if I'm going to hate my career, my job, I might as well sell my soul to the highest bidder. So I thought about going into like private equity. I was interviewing at the late stage firms, like the KKRs, the TPGs, got rejected from them. So I went earlier stage to growth stage, didn't get jobs there, went to venture capital. And after enough no's, just said, well, why don't I just go off and try to start my own company? And so this was 2010. Facebook was just going public. Pinterest was becoming sort of the hotness. And it was sort of this realization that this was one of the only times in human history where just with your laptop, you could go off, people in their 20s and 30s and build these multi-billion-dollar companies. And so I had a few ideas, tested them out, and kept getting stuck at the ideation phase, because once you actually have to start building, you need an engineer. And you go to all the engineers and all your friends from college, and they're like, well, why do I need you? You just got an idea. Everyone's got ideas. They're a dime a dozen. And so after that, I was like, well, I could go back to college and learn software engineering, do a 2-year program or go to community college. And ended up reading about the dev boot camps that were popping up in San Francisco.
Okay.
And so I was one of the first 6 cohorts of dev boot camp down in San Francisco. There's probably like 30, 40 of us who were there. It was like a small, tiny office in Chinatown. And that's how I kicked off my software engineering career. And the first company that I worked at, and the only place that I interviewed at, was a payment startup. And so I had actually done a consulting project at Amex and thought it was the most boring thing in the world, and was like, I'll never set my career there. And then just met these engineers, and they were incredible. And they were backed by Andreessen, also part of Y Combinator. And this is the time when Stripe was like a 40-person startup. We were 15. and I begged them for a job. So they paid me $3,000 a month. I literally for the interview brought them donuts and basically said, "Hey, I will code for food." They gave me that laptop that was like 5 times used, had all these stickers on it, had a loud like fan that was just humming, and they basically said, "All right, you can start off in the support team and support engineering, and while you're not answering support tickets, you can code." And so I plopped my laptop next to the CTO and VP of engineering. I would make them breakfast and food and just do anything that they would. So they would help teach me and coach me up. And I finally got a full-time offer there and just fell in love with the space. And it was very different sort of building the payments infrastructure than just working on sort of loyalty points and programs. And that company ended up selling to Stripe in 2015. And so we were super early on in that sort of developer friendly payments world. We were duking it out against Stripe. We were winning against them. And after we sold, a bunch of us who were there early were like, "Why did we sell? Like we're winning. We're building an incredible company here." And we just said, "Let's do it again." And so in many ways, Phoenix is sort of the 2.0 version of that prior company, building on all those lessons that we had. And so a lot of startups and fintech in general, I think, is these series of happy accidents. Right? People think that you come up with this like startup idea, you were innately born for that, and there's this aha moment. But a lot of us just stumble upon it just through trial and error.
Well, and it's such a great story, and it also takes a good dose of stubbornness, right? Like here you
I've,
are, making all this money as a management consultant. I've had a similar moment, like, nah, just not going to do it.
yeah, stubbornness I think is a critical characteristic of any founder, right? You have to have that resiliency, that tenacity, that mental fortitude, and just like enjoy trying to prove people wrong.
When I told my mom that I was starting a company, and I think I was 28, my first company, and she was like, "Oh no, Tommy, no, señor, Tommy, that's crazy. You should." Sandia National Labs is hiring in Albuquerque. Tommy, think about that. What did you? What'd your parents say?
So when I first told them I was going to go learn software engineering, they were extremely concerned. I think my mom was like, "Oh, so you're working in IT?" I was like, "No, it's different than IT. It is with computers." And then when I went to a payment company, she was like, "So you work for Visa?" And I was like, "Not really, but kind of." And we definitely had a lot of my uncles, family, friends who thought I was making a massive mistake. I think I was dating someone at the time, and their parents said something to the effect of, "I think Richie's having a quarter life crisis because he thinks he can learn software engineering at the age of 25." And they probably were right, to be honest, in hindsight. But it was a wild, sort of transition, especially to jump from where I was at. I was, staying in 5-star hotels, had three like $100 a night per diem dinners, like steak dinners every single night, and there was just that emptiness. And so I think when you feel that, you just know that you got to try something else. And I've never been afraid to try and fail.
Yeah, well, that's fuel for company building right there. Hey, one more quick question. When you went to Harvard,
Yeah.
how many times had you been on a plane before you flew out to Boston?
That was my second time ever. So the very first time I ever got on a plane was to go visit where my mom grew up, a ranch, when my grandparents had their great grandparents had their 50th anniversary, and the second time was for college visits. And I remember, getting off the plane, being in Boston, and you're in the cab, and just stuck against the taxi glass window, looking at all the brownstone buildings, feeling like you're in a movie. It was a wild experience. I imagine you had a very similar surreal experience as well.
Well, so the first time anybody in our family had actually been on a plane was when Marty, my oldest brother, flew to Boston to go to Harvard. That was the very first time somebody had actually been on a plane. When I went to college, it was my second flight. There was this other thing that in Boston actually that I, like a youth thing that I'd been invited to, and so it was my second trip when I arrived in second trip on a plane when I got to Boston. My brother Ricky was then a senior as I was an entering freshman, so I was, leaving Albuquerque and starting this new adventure in Boston. And when I landed, I actually got off the plane and kissed the tarmac. That's that's how important it was to me.
How
to
long did it take you to figure out how to dress for the winters?
Right. Well, we all went to that Filene's, right? Didn't you go to Filene's and buy one of those big ridiculous trench coats for $35 to keep you warm?
No, my dad took me to a off season snowboarding outlet, and so I bought like a snowboarding jacket that had like faux fur all over it. It was like plaid, and so I clearly looked like I had never been in the snow before. That was the extent.
Yeah, when I was there, we went, you bought these like gigantic wool trench coats that
Yeah.
made you look like a Russian commissar from World War I or something. And you just drape it on and try to light a fire and survive.
Yeah, you can always tell the West Coast kids by the first snowfall because they're the only ones who run outside and play in the snow.
Exactly. All right. Well, listen, really appreciate your sharing some of that. Let's switch gears and get into company building. So you're building in a space where we hear a ton about that big kahuna player you already mentioned, Stripe. So I'm kind of curious just to, now that you're doing it again, what does Stripe do? What markets does it serve? How is Phoenix different?
Yeah, so we're both payment processors.
Right.
And that means that we work with merchants, marketplaces, vertical SaaS companies, e commerce, retailers to process payments both online as also in store using these types of like physical devices. And so we help these merchants just accept credit card payments. And typically, when people think about credit card processing, they're thinking about the Visa, the MasterCard, the Amex that sits in their pocket. That's the consumer side of that experience. But there's this massively complex ecosystem that exists behind the scenes to make this all work. Right? We work and interact with credit cards multiple times per day, but you never really think about how it all works. And it is incredibly complicated. And so there's half of the ecosystem that works for the consumer, the other half works with the merchants. And Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and Discover are really just like the pipes that connect both of those parties together. They set the rules, the regulations, the pricing. And our job is not just to relay the credit card details to the appropriate networks. There's a lot of compliance obligations, regulatory things that we have to do to manage and create a safe payments experience. Now, when you think about us versus Stripe, Adyen, and Square, the honest answer is that we all provide the same core payment functionality. However, we're all very finely tuned and configured based on our original ICP, right? Who are the first customers that we were built for? So you think about Adyen, they work with the Burger Kings, the Gucci's, the Spotify's of the world, these sort of multinational global enterprises who need payments in multiple countries. Well, it's very difficult for them to go down market to SMBs and mid-market players because they didn't build all the capabilities that those folks need. You look at Square, for example, they got started off in card present, limited SKU sort of retailers. And so that's why you see them only in coffee shops and bike shops. You look at Stripe, it was very developer centric. And so they've struggled to really meet the needs of these sort of no code and non technical businesses. At Phoenix, we've been focused really on those no code businesses from our very earliest days, really focusing on omni-channel payments, which is basically businesses who have both an online and a physical presence and wrapping that all together. Okay. And so the way that we like to think about it is that if you think about Adyen, they're for the enterprise, Square is for the micro merchant, Stripe is the developer. We're focusing on the 22 million businesses in the US who don't have developers, right? We all talk about the sort of rise of the sort of developer ecosystem. Well, there's 23 million businesses. There's like maybe a million and a half developers that are out there. Most companies do not have the capabilities to integrate these types of solutions. And that's really where we end up coming in.
Brilliant. Well, and so any kind of lessons, because for people listening, entrepreneurs who are battling against incumbents, and by the way, if I had a quarter for every time in my own build outs when somebody goes, oh, I'm pretty sure Google's going to do that. Oh, I'm pretty sure Microsoft's going to do that, right? So what lessons can startups draw when you're, competing against an incumbent and people are saying, but of course they're going to do that?
Yeah. Well, first off, we don't just compete against Stripe. We win, and we win consistently. We win probably about 60% of the deals that we see, and we probably go up against Stripe 90% of the time. I think one of the things when you're competing against a behemoth is really understanding your market dynamics. And so for payments, it's just not a winner-take-all model, right? Most people think that it is, especially people in Silicon Valley and the sort of Silicon Valley bubble that we have. But when you think about a company like Stripe, they're probably 6% of the US market. They're not even the top 3 players here today. Less than probably 1% of the entire global space. So there's just such a massive opportunity that's out there. And when you think about how to actually compete against these players, especially for someone like us who's who had to get started off years after with, a fraction of the capital that Stripe initially had. I think you have to be incredibly capital efficient. That is absolutely critical because you can't outspend them. You can't out-hire them. You have years to catch up in terms of a roadmap. And so you have to be ruthlessly focused.
Yeah.
You have to focus on what are the actual features and components that your customers need. Market positioning also matters a lot in really differentiating yourself and getting those initial customers. Honestly, hustling and building trust with those early customers, it's such a relationship game. And for a company to take a bet on you and your startup when there's safer options out there, you have to put yourself out there to really build those types of relationships and know that they're investing in you personally, and they're taking a bet on you personally. I think the other thing is that you have to focus a lot on who you're building for, and how you're building also matters a lot. And so again, you can't just replicate exactly what they're doing. You're figuring out a different product persona that you're developing for. For us at Phoenix, we understood that we had to have a really great developer experience, but we had a different view. We thought that the developer experience is the first 1 to 2 weeks of any implementation. The power users of payments are non-technical folks. They are the compliance, support, finance, the people who live and breathe in your dashboard, who don't get access to engineering resources. And so that's something that we really fixated on early as well. I think the other thing, you got to ignore the noise. Like, there's going to be so many doubters. There's going to be so many negative folks out there, VCs, employees, things like that. And you have to really continue to think about the long game and investing over time, and not sort of just whiplashing the business and the product roadmap based on who yelled at you or screamed at you last. And the last thing I would say is, it really comes down to the company culture that you're building and the types of people that you are recruiting as well. You need other people who are also have that type of underdog mentality, people who are up for a big fight, people who aren't just looking for a safe seat on a rocket ship and just want to sort of rest, invest. And I think if you can get that type of talent and that type of culture and the types of people who really love a fight, that's what really sets yourself up for success.
You want your ballers and your brawlers all in.
I haven't heard that, but I like it. I'm gonna steal it.
Yeah, you want ballers and brawlers following a shot caller like you, Richie. So everyone's a buzz about stablecoin, and
yes,
and especially in the context of AI. So I was wondering if you could break it down for people who don't follow this space regularly. What's the big deal, and why do we care about stablecoin here?
Yeah, so stable coins are a form of cryptocurrency that are typically pegged to a fiat currency to make them more stable. And so one of the things that you see with traditional cryptocurrencies, you think about Bitcoin or Ethereum, is that they have tremendous price volatility, right? They're speculative assets and people are investing in them because they think that the price is going to go up. Well, that means that it's really bad for actually payments, right? You want to have the consistency of knowing that this one stable coin is equal to one USD dollar, right? And so what we've seen is that people basically treat it as a digital dollar, more so for international cross-border payments, because you can effectively settle one of these transactions in near real time, whereas the legacy cross-border systems are really kind of cobbled together intermediary banks that can take days for these funds to actually settle. It's slow, it's painful, and the way that I've thought about it is that it's much more like a new rail than like a completely different form of currency. It's similar to RTP or FedNow, but with borderless capabilities. I think the reality is that there's getting a lot of adoption because of that cross-border piece, but there's still a tremendous amount of limitations that are there, both in the form of very complicated user experiences. You have to get wallets and understand all the different nomenclatures, so a lot of consumers aren't necessarily adopting them. There's a very new and nascent sort of regulatory framework that people are really trying to figure out. Right. The compliance obligations aren't clear either. A lot of folks, are kind of skeptical about whether or not each stablecoin is actually backed by an actual US dollar and if it's actually being held in reserves. And then from an adoption perspective, it's not just the user experience, you also have to change consumer behavior as well, right? Everybody is used to using their credit card because it's so easy to use, and every single merchant already has adoption, right? The network effect of the credit card systems is insane, right? You can go anywhere around the world and use your debit card or credit card and have a high degree of confidence that it's going to get accepted. And so there's that inherent trust that's built into it. And the other part is that consumers just really like points, right? They're addicted to the point system that's there. And that's hard for people to rip out that expectation. And so I think what's going to happen is that there will continue to be traction that is developed with stablecoins. And if it does get enough traction that it really starts to eat into some of the other payment forms, it'll just get regulated like everything else, right? It's going to get tucked in, and it's the same thing as having ACH, PayPal, and these other methods, in that it's going to be very good for specific use cases, and it's going to be very bad for other use cases. So you're still going to have the broad suite of payment methods just to operate your business.
So I want to come back to something you touched on there. One of the lessons learned, obviously, of the Great Depression and the Great Recession is what I'm thinking of in 2008, is that there were so many players taking liberties and not holding reserves in hard currency to pay off the bets that they were making. So when you talk about stablecoin and whether or not it's backed by good old-fashioned USD, what's your sense? I know it's probably not a totally knowable, measurable thing today, but you're in the flow. How crazy is it? Are people taking liberties, or is it really backed one-to-one?
Every once in a while, you definitely see a stablecoin company who blows up. So there definitely is not enough of the same controls that we have developed on the banking system, right? Post 08, you had a lot of the too big to fail sort of rules that got put in place, the stress testing to make sure that they could handle the various volatility changes.
Yeah.
There was a period where there was a lot of these algorithmic stable coins that were out there that were producing yield for anybody who held those products, and then boom, they blow up and you realize that the emperor has no clothes. And so I think until you really start to get that same sort of regulatory scrutiny, it's always going to be questionable as to whether or not they're actually backed. I mean, if you're earning 4 to 7% yield on these coins, that yield doesn't come from just out of thin air, right? They're taking that and then they're loaning it out to other people in similar fashions to a bank as well.
Do you think we're on the cusp of some blowups?
Oh yeah, always. I mean, we were waiting for the whole FTX, BlockFi blowups for a while. I mean, I think there's a lot of really similar analogies that you see in parallels from 08 to what happened a few years ago. I think especially the collateralization of a lot of these coins and using it as a way to lend out products, right? So like in 08, people were collateralizing their houses to get mortgages and loans. And then what you ended up seeing with like BlockFi and others, they were collateralizing against your current crypto holdings. Well, if your current crypto holdings get cut by 90% of their price, then poof, you've now defaulted on all of those. And that's what happened with a bunch of these big crypto firms. So it feels like people have very short-term memories when it comes to a lot of this stuff.
It's funny how that goes. Hey, So I like to say that in my own build out, smart architecture decisions, if we get it really right at design time, gives you an extra 80 IQ points later, especially when you're scaling. So I was wondering, if you think back to the founding of Finex, Richie, what were sort of key architectural commitments that you guys made that you think have really paid off as you've continued to build the business?
Yeah. So because we were previously at another payment company, I think we learned a lot of lessons. We learned a lot about what to do as well as what not to do, both from an architectural perspective and building a company as well. So I think that provided a lot of foresight into how we thought about architecting our tech stack as well. It's probably 4 things that really were transformational for us. I think number 1 was the API's data model that we had, and I can go into more details there. The second was that we built a really great abstraction layer in terms of not being overly tightly coupled to the legacy payment processors. So every single payment startup that pops up, Square, Stripe, Adyen, Finex, we were all actually built on top of those legacy systems that were built out back in the 80s and the 90s with hopes of eventually building up enough volume so you could connect into Visa, MasterCard, Amex directly. Well, that takes time to build up enough volume to actually go to those systems. And if you tightly couple your system, you can't actually rip them out. And so those were things that we were thoughtful of as well. Our technology choices, we were never sort of swayed by the latest hype. And we went, to the more tried and true technologies. We're a Java shop built on Postgres and AWS. We also thought about making sure that everybody was a Java engineer as opposed to just letting everybody pick whatever language they thought was, the hottest thing and flavor of the week. And then I'd say the last thing really came down to our organizational design. And I think that's something that people don't think about enough. People talk about Conway's Law, or the idea that you ship your organization. And I think that's really something that people should think about very early on. Whether or not you hire all generalists or specialists, how you think about the relations between engineering, product, and product design, how you think about breaking up your agile teams as well. Those things all have really big impacts long term in terms of your product's efficiency, scalability, configurability. Those are things that we geek out on a lot, and I think it paid off in a big way.
Brilliant. A lot of people around here talk about product market fit. It's almost just become trite and tiring, because my beef with it is, product market fit, but what do you mean exactly by product market fit, right?
Right.
I'm wondering if you'd share your perspective. Like, how do you think about product market fit? How do you test and know that you've actually achieved it? And when did that happen for Phoenix?
Yeah, I have a very similar visceral reaction to the VC trope of how do we win? And like, such a weird, like, horrible question. Like, first off, what do you mean by winning? How do you define winning?
One more. What keeps you up at
Yeah.
night?
Oh,
Right?
yeah. Love that one. I
Yeah.
love that one.
I don't sleep.
Yeah,
I'm worried
exactly.
all the time.
Well, when it comes to product market fit, I think one of the best quotes that I heard was from a founder who was speaking. They had taken their company public, and she said something about, you think that you have product market fit, but you don't. And when you're starting your company, it'll be years of you just toiling away. You're pushing a rock up a hill. And you think that because you're winning deals that you have that product market fit. And then just one day it just clicks. And there's this release that happens of all that pressure. And then the momentum just starts to carry you in this way that you'd never seen before. And I think that's exactly right. It kind of reminds, I think we were talking about it over dinner. It's like the Supreme Court justice case around what is considered obscene content. Right. And the Supreme Court justice said, I know it when I see it. And I think that's exactly what happens when it comes to product market fit.
Exactly.
We were probably toiling away for 7 to 8 years before we really felt that, right? We're 10 years in. And I think a lot of it, going back to the sort of industry and product dynamics, matter based on your industry, right? One of our investors, Charles Hudson, over at Precursor, said that, he shared with me once, there are certain industries where you can have 50% of the product set and the features that customers want, and people will buy it, and they'll buy it repeatedly. There's other industries where you need 75%. And there's some industries where you have to have 95% of all the features that people want before it just starts to click, and you have this repeatable sales motion that all comes together. That's payments, right? Payments has been around for decades. I think Visa popped up back in like the 1950s. And so it's very feature rich. It's very deep in terms of the product capabilities that you have, right? You need Apple Pay on the web. You need Apple Pay on your phone. You need Apple Pay on the mobile devices, on the tap to pay on your hardware. And if you don't have one of those, and each one of them can take 6 to 9 months to develop, sorry. And so the way that we measured it early on was that we really got deep into tracking our pipeline metrics, our win rates, and most importantly, loss rates and loss reasons. And so we would track all these to understand what were the real reasons why we were losing deals. Because if you ask an AE, a sales AE, they'll just tell you whatever they heard was the last loss reason. And that's the most important thing in the world. But when you get it from a data-driven perspective, you can really start to see how you chew away at those things. And as we knock down all those product-related gaps, once we pretty much got it down to like 1 or 2 things, everything just sort of unlocked.
Brilliant. Yeah, I really appreciate that point about 50, 75, 95.
Yeah.
You can't, you have to qualify product market fit. You have to qualify the market in that particular way. That really resonates with me. I'm thinking about one of our build outs here where I've said, oh my God, there's no partial credit. Like, if you don't have this massive surface area and you just nail every piece of it, the buyer, the adopter will just tell you to go jump in a lake. And then, exactly as you say, sometimes you find these magical little insertion points and it just spreads like wildfire. So,
Often I think a lot of folks ask, like, what's your wedge? And in certain industries, there's not a wedge. You just need the whole thing. It's just like, build the whole thing. That's it.
Yeah. So many years ago, Richie, I worked for a guy named John Blaine who said, Chavez, if you ever have a job where you only hate 30% of what you do, that's a kick-ass job. And I see you don't have a trust fund or anything. So you need to hold on to that job. Right. And so the point of it is that there are parts of the job that you relish less than other parts. I actually thought about this. I think like mine is like 20%. So, on an index basis, I'm totally winning, right? But I'm curious, what's your 30%? What's the part of your job you like least?
I honestly probably don't have 30% that I hate. I would say that, and this is not just probably what like the PR team would suggest that I say. It's probably closer to 5%. I
Really?
think that I feel like I'm the luckiest guy. I have one of the greatest jobs in the world, and I've had a lot of jobs that I didn't like, and to be able to work with some of the smartest, hardest working people, and now have them be some of my closest friends, and work on a problem that matters, that's impactful. We process billions of dollars every single month all around the world for tens of thousands of merchants. That's something that's really special, and I feel very lucky to be able to do that. Obviously, there's things that I don't like. I'd say maybe it's closer to like 5% of my job. I won't say all of them because I don't want to offend anybody. But I think probably if I had to give one answer, it would be probably fundraising. It's probably the thing that I hate the most. And we're good at it. We've raised over $200 million. And it is very much a process, and it is a skill set that as a founder, you got to get good at because it's necessary to drive forward the business. But it's not sexy. It's not, it's kind of romanticized, and it's just a grind. It's beating your head against the wall. It's doing the same pitch over and over again with the same amount of energy every single time, and knowing that you're going to have to, just kind of grind it out. I used to work in political campaigns, and you're just dialing for dollars, and that's kind of what it feels like. The song and dance part of it is it's grueling, and you're not actually building your business during that period, right? And so even if you have a fast round that gets done in 2 months or so, end to end from the first meetings down to wires hitting, you're probably spending 2 months in advance of that thinking of the materials, the narrative, getting your data room together. And so you completely disappear from your business in that point. And that's a tough thing to do, right? Especially in early stage companies where every single day matters.
And you're still accountable for running the business, right? So that's
You still got to do your job.
so
It's still
that's where they
happening.
screw you.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think
What, what,
I'm equally
what was
lucky.
yours? Yeah. What was your 30% or 20%, you said?
Um, I don't relish the legal aspects that go into fine tuning a final contract, and I'm kind of neurotic, so I have to sit, especially for early deals when we're still kind of forming our go to market approach. I'll read things, very carefully, and I don't. It's not my favorite thing. Um, I have said in the past, every hour that you spend with a lawyer is an hour you're never going to get back, Richie. Um,
Yeah. You will pay for it though. They will definitely bill you for it.
and they'll pay you $800 and you're never getting it back. But
Exactly.
yeah, no, I agree with you. Like fundraising is really depleting. It's really hard. Speaking of no partial credit, you have to go into every meeting wired up. I chat myself with 2 or 3 shots of espresso when I'm in a big pitch, and you just got to you have to be in the matrix, seeing all the objections. You have to be uh, on your game. Not You have to have conviction, but not too cocky, right? You have to
Great.
be uh, detailed and thoughtful, but not too neurotic,
Yeah.
like
And you gotta know
like
how to tell
like
a
us
story.
founders really are, right?
You gotta know how to tell a story.
Right.
And I think that's an important skill set too.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, listen, Rishi, let's move to our lightning round where I'm going to ask you a few quick hit questions where you just emote. Don't think about it. Just react quickly so we can get to the raw, really good stuff.
I'm not good at that.
Oh, I think you are.
I gotta give a detailed answer.
Okay, so speaking of pitching and VCs, what's the rudest, most fucked up thing a venture capitalist has ever told you?
Oh man, there's so many. There's so
Top
many fun
top
stories.
top two.
I think top two, probably one was from an existing investor. This is years ago, where we were sort of like in a rough patch, and he was just like, "You should just sell the business." And you're like, "All right, thanks for believing." And so now that investor is very happy we didn't. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's probably a top one. Second one was probably it wasn't a maybe it wasn't a quote, but it was more of an interaction. We showed up as like probably our third pitch for this Series A, And the investor showed up late to our meeting, just literally walking in with a piece of pizza and eating it with his mouth open, and was like, "Hey, you're George, right?" And I was like, "Nope." And he's like, "You're the data engineer." I was like, "Nope." And I was like, "What is happening?" And then he sat down and proceeded to say like something about how, been wanting to invest in a payment company. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to be the one. And I was like, "All right, I never want to work with you. This is absurd." It's like out of a movie.
I had you flashed me back to one moment where I was talking to just a natural born asshole like that and carrying on. And I had the laptop open. I closed the laptop and I was self regulating, but it's like, hey, we're not a match. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Let's wrap it
that's a
up
great
there.
way to handle it. Very mature. Very mature.
Well,
Yeah,
a lot of help. That's my new self, Richie.
yeah.
My former self, yeah, probably not so much. Hey, so what's your main health or productivity hack these days?
Oh man, I could go on this for like a minute. Um, I don't know. There's one, and I think the reason why is I get this question oftentimes at work, and I think the reality is like I've spent a lot of time over the last decade figuring out how to optimize my energy levels, my overall performance, my emotional regulation. How do I get to a to a flow state? And when you think about it that way, um, there's both the mental health elements of it, there's the physical health elements of it, there's how do you structure your day for actual clarity of thought. And so it's really a bunch of like small decisions that compound over time. And so when it comes to health, I work out every single morning. I run a mile and then hit the gym for about like 45 minutes. I actually stopped drinking coffee because I realized that would spike my energy levels. I don't drink during the weekdays unless it's with you because we have a good time. I also, from a focus perspective, realized that you're just bombarded by all these notifications. So I always have my phone upside down all day long with do not disturb. I mute all my notifications on Slack. I actually meet probably once a quarter with my EA, who she's amazing, to look at my entire schedule to figure out what were the types of meetings and what type of cadences actually work to minimize context switching, which types of meetings depleted energy, what was the best way to sort of organize them, what meeting cadences worked for the entire organization. And then for mental clarity and like mental health, I got off of social media like 7 years ago, which was like one of the best things that I ever did. So no Instagram, no Facebook or anything like that, because
Here.
just yeah. And then I think the other thing is on outside of sleep. That's probably the other thing. It is really just signing off Friday night. And so I believe in sprinting as hard as you humanly possibly can. I mean, I probably averaged 60 to 80 hours the last like 10 years, and people didn't think I could do it. And hell yeah, still doing it. But I think, giving yourself that mental time to just shut off and be completely present. And so Friday, once we'll get drinks with the team. And then Saturday, I tried, and like, unless it's like fundraiser, some massive issue, like thing that we're working on, I won't look at anything until Sunday. And so giving myself that time to recharge. And typically on Sundays, it's not like calls or thing like that. It's independent, heads down thinking and processing of information where I can just be by myself. And all of those things I think have resulted in improvements in my overall performance.
Yeah, that last part is something I think I've been really awful at, and I'm aiming to improve. Like just a hard separation, right? Just to kind of reset and get your head straight. Getting a little bit better at that, but yeah, I appreciate every bit of that, and I've taken to telling the co-founders that we get to work with in my shop, like founder self-care is the precondition of a long-term successful company. Like you,
Yeah.
you
I mean,
think you're killing it and grinding and
yeah.
crushing, but if you're not taking care of yourself, and we've seen that happen, by the
Yeah.
way, in a couple places where the founder doesn't take care of themselves, and then millions of dollars potentially get
Yeah.
lit on fire, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So
I think the thing too about the signing off element is that even if you see one email, one Slack, you carry it throughout the rest of the day. Like if you can limit it to like 20, 30 minutes, doesn't matter. You have that residual mental like burden that follows you throughout the whole day and you can't stop thinking about it. And so if there's ever an emergency, I tell people like, hey, you got to call or text me. And we have that same expectation for the team. And payments is 24/7. We're used to getting called on holidays, right? We don't get holidays like everybody else does. It's Black Friday. We're working. New Year's Eve, we're working. But I think when you have those opportunities to sign off, you got to take them.
My team didn't think I could do it. I took a break in August and I said, I'm going into a digital detox. I'm not going to touch my laptop. I'm going to keep my phone handy just in case my parents or something comes up there, but otherwise I'm off the grid. They
Yeah.
really didn't believe I could pull it off. And Richie, I actually did. So proud of
And
me.
how'd you feel? How'd you feel?
Great. It felt great.
Right?
Like I had a whole coherent thought or two or three, maybe, Amazing.
Funny enough, I think the other thing too is when I'm doing some of the like that detox moment, you end up thinking about work when you weren't thinking about it, but like these great ideas just pop up in your head because you weren't concentrating, right?
100%.
It's oh shit, that's a really good way to
Yeah.
think about that. That's when
Yeah.
those moments come.
Totally. Okay, one final question. You're actually located just a block from my office here in San Francisco. So,
That's right.
of course, I'm going to presume San Francisco is your favorite city, but outside or right after San Francisco, what's your favorite city for a work trip?
I totally agree. San Francisco is the greatest city in the world. I love it. Been here for 13 years. I'm long San Francisco. Uh,
Me too.
Favorite city for a work trip? New York. I love New York. I lived there for like 2 years, and the energy there is still as contagious as ever.
Yeah.
So much culture, so much fun. It's just a great place to be. So luckily, we have a lot of investors and customers who are out there, so I get a lot
Yeah.
of excuses to.
That's the main place I go, and I'm right there with you. One of the greatest regrets I have is that I didn't get to live in New York for at least a year or two in my 20s, which sounds like you did.
I did. It
Yeah.
was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
Well, in my next life. Hey, so that wraps up this episode of the Closed Session Podcast. Richie, this is fun.
Super fun.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
excited for next dinner, part 2.
We're going to keep on doing those. And like we said, we'll bring the microphones next time. If you'd like to contact Richie, you can find his LinkedIn profile in the show notes or at closedsessionpod.com. You can also visit his company website at finix, finix.com. If you haven't already subscribed and want a regular stream of research insights in your podcast feed, hit that subscribe button or follow us on YouTube. That's all for today, everybody. Until next time, keep building, keep cranking.